In 1953 in Rio de Janeiro, a boy named Arthur would be born to Portuguese parents, and just 3 years later Pelé would debut and take Brazilian football by storm. Like most, that one kid would idolize him. Little did he know that over the years he would earn himself two nicknames. First, his parents would start calling him Zico, a diminutive of his name. And in this video, I will tell you how he earned himself his second nickname, the White Pelé. His journey towards legend status started when he was just 14 years old, already with the trials scheduled in America. He would impress so much in the meantime, scoring 9 goals in a single match, that he would get another trial opportunity at Flamengo, which of course he took, as it was his family's club. At Flamengo they noticed Zico had one single problem that affected his game. He was too weak and skinny, but he was not having any of that. From a young age he would enter a special diet and workout routine, growing stronger and stronger over time and eventually getting his chance at professional football in 1971. This wouldn't last too long though, as a new coach would arrive and send Zico back as he thought he was too young. The following season he would get his second chance, as his youth team coach would get promoted to the first team. From there on, Zico would absolutely dominate and hold on to his place in the first team. During his first few years he would have a tough time getting any silverware, as despite dominating the regional championship, Flamengo had a tough time making it to the final stages of the Brazilian championship. In 1976, Zico would show that he was gonna do anything in his power to get Flamengo to the top of Brazilian football, missing out on the final stages by a single point despite scoring 14 goals in 19 starts, the second most in the competition. 2 years later he would take part in his first World Cup for Brazil, where despite being mainly used as a sub, he would get a third place medal. The following year he would finally have the opportunity to become one of the main men for Brazil, as he had just scored 65 goals in 51 appearances, playing as an attacking midfielder. This way, he took part in the 1979 Copa America. Being exceptional throughout the group stage, he would get a red card in the last match and miss out on the games against Paraguay, witnessing Brazil get knocked out from outside the pitch. The next year, something exceptional would happen. After managing only a narrow second place finish in the first group stage of the Brazilian League, Flamengo would tower over their group in the second round, and they were now in the final group stage, amongst the 16 best teams in Brazil, with Santos, who finished above them in the first group stage, getting drawn with them once more. In their first match against Sportiva Ferroviária, Zico would get a hat-trick to put Flamengo in front. Then Flamengo would get a draw against Ponte Preta. As Santos got a win and a draw, the final match between the two would decide who would go on to the knockout stage. This was perhaps Flamengo's most important game of all time, as they had never won the league. In that match, Zico showed that he was indeed there to bring them to the top, scoring twice and getting them the win over Santos. In the knockout stage they would meet Curitiba, and once again Zico would score twice, just like that. In the last 4 matches, Zico had scored 7 out of the 8 goals scored by Flamengo. This is the definition of carrying a team. The second leg with Curitiba would see Zico go goalless for the first time in a while, but they would go through and on to the final, where they would face Atlético Mineiro. The first leg would see Flamengo lose 1-0 with a goal by Reinaldo. The second leg though would be far more exciting, with nearly 150,000 people watching the game at the Maracanã. By the 7th minute, Nunes would get the first goal for Flamengo, settling the score, but then Reinaldo got another goal, only for Zico to come back and settle the score once more, to which Reinaldo would come and score again, before unexplainably getting sent off after walking in front of a free kick. Regardless of how upset the fans were at the referee, by the end of the match Flamengo would be champions of Brazil for the first time in their history, with Zico topping the goal-scoring charts with 21 goals, 7 more than anyone else in the competition. After this historic season, the 1982 season would be an odd one, as despite going out in the quarterfinals of the Brazilian Championship, it would take part in the Copa Libertadores, where Flamengo would top their group despite a tough battle with Atlético Mineiro. The second group stage would go more smoothly, with Flamengo winning every match and go on to face Cobreloa in the final. Having won the first match 2-1 and lost the second 1-0, they had to go into a third match to break the tie, where they would beat Cobreloa 2-0, totaling the score at 4-2. One thing was clear: Zico was the greatest player in the world, as he had just scored all 4 of Flamengo's goals and finished as top scorer of the Copa Libertadores with 11 goals. Truly exceptional from Zico. Later in the year they would also beat Liverpool 3-0 in the Intercontinental Cup final. In 1982, he would once again win the Brazilian Championship, scoring 21 goals, the second most ever scored in the history of the competition. Over the summer, he would take part in the World Cup once again, and this would be his best international tournament with Brazil. With an amazing squad with players like Sócrates and Falcão, and although Zico would score 4 goals, the third most in the competition, even being involved in 8 consecutive goals for Brazil, he would not make it past the second group stage, as they would fall to Italy. For his final season in Brazil, he would win once again the Brazilian Championship, beating Santos in the final. This way he would leave the club, having won 3 championships in 4 years. Let me remind you that before he came, they had never won the championship. Truly amazing stuff from one of the greatest of all time. Just like this, he would leave for Udinese in Italy, despite having offers from AC Milan and AS Roma. At the time, the $4 million proposed by Udinese would mean Zico was the most expensive player of all time, beating Maradona's $3 million transfer. At the time, the Italian Federation refused to believe Udinese had that kind of money, so they would block the transfer, and the people of Udine would take it to the streets manifesting against this until the Federation finally allowed Zico to come. Zico was expected to help turn the table in Italy, as Udinese had never had much success. In his first season, he scored 19 goals in the league, only outperformed by Platini. Despite Zico missing games through injury, his help would lead the team to score twice as many goals than the previous season. But still, the back line was not the best, and they would finish only 9th. This would massively impact Zico's mental state, who felt betrayed by the board would not back him with players up to his standards. After several injuries, suspensions for openly attacking referees and being charged with tax evasion, he would play one last match against Maradona's Napoli. In the first minutes of the match, a free kick would turn out as the first goal of the match by Maradona. Then Zico would also strike an amazing free kick with a rebound turning into a goal as well. Zico dominated the match for a while, with the ball hitting the woodwork a few times as Udinese showed off their dominance. Later, Zico would hit yet another free kick, smashing it into the bar. As it seemed the match would end with a deserved Udinese win, Maradona on the 88th minute would jump for an aerial duel with the goalkeeper and score through a handball, not punished by the referee, a preview of the iconic Hand of God. As Zico left Udinese, he would of course go back to Brazil, as mind you he was already 31 years old. Back at Flamengo, he would very soon have a nearly career-ending injury, leaving him off the pitch for months, and only getting anywhere near full recovery about 2 years later. A year in which, despite being now 33 years old, he would lead Flamengo to yet another championship win. Despite only playing 16 matches that season, his most iconic moments would include a hat-trick against Santa Cruz and scoring a goal in the semi-final against Atlético Mineiro. After this, he would play a few more seasons for Flamengo, still struggling with his health, playing his last match for the club in 1989 against their rivals Fluminense, scoring the first goal of the match in a 5-0 win, a proper send-off for sure. He would retire for 2 years, even becoming Brazil's Minister of Sports for a while. He would come back to football and play 4 seasons in Japan for Kashima Antlers, who took part in Japan's first ever league season. Kashima were not a rich club at the time and should have not had a shot, but Zico helped them finish the season as runner-ups, becoming Japan's most loved player and being nicknamed the God of Football. To this day, there is still a statue of Zico outside the Kashima Antlers Stadium. Zico was an exceptional attacking midfielder, one of the best playmakers of all time, when also managing to be a better goal scorer than most legendary strikers. Just to put it into perspective, he scored more goals than Anelka and Francesco Totti put together, and I can't even imagine how many assists he might have provided. Zico was also one of those rare cases when you add talent to hard work, consistently staying behind in training to practice extra hours, and known to be exceptional as a leader, determined, hard-working and dedicated. Quite simply, the perfect footballer. They say Zico was the white Pelé, as he made himself the heir to his throne as the king of Brazilian football. But honestly, being called Zico by itself would be enough of a compliment. Getting into a ranking system, it will first be judged on his finishing, which was absolutely incredible. Very few midfielders can boast of having scored close to 600 goals over their careers, even being a very proficient header of the ball despite being short. He easily gets a 10 out of 10. Then we should get into his playmaking, where he simply was one of the best of all time, a 10 out of 10. When it comes to dribbling, there's absolutely no arguing once again. Being perfectly ambidextrous, he was a magician, a 10 out of 10. In terms of speed and physicality, well, he was really fast, one of the quickest of his time, but also really short and with a slender body that prevented him from being great in physical duels. It's an 8 out of 10. Finally, his mentality. He was an exceptional leader, super professional, but he did lose his cool a lot in his time in Italy. It's a 9 out of 10. The second part focuses on his legacy, being its first attribute consistency. Though he did not win any trophies with any other teams besides Flamengo, not even with the national team, he kept scoring and playing exceptionally well everywhere. It's a 9 out of 10. Then Flair. Well, it was the peak of fantasistas in football, a 10 out of 10. Getting into his trophy cabinet, he only has one major international trophy and only 4 league titles. Though he doesn't technically have a Ballon d'Or, he should have won several times, but he just wasn't eligible because he wasn't European, so a 6 out of 10. His longevity is hard to judge since he did play for a long time, but he retired midway through and he wasn't playing anywhere near his full potential at the end of his career, but he did play 22 different seasons despite a long list of injuries. It's a 7 out of 10. Finally, the icon factor is simply the most underrated player of all time. Rarely see him mentioned in a conversation for the greatest of all time when I think it's pretty clear that he's a contender. It simply seems like his name has been forgotten by some, though the Latin-speaking countries still adore him and cherish him. It's a 7 out of 10. This totals out at 86 out of 100, placing him right next to Maldini and only below Cruyff, Puskás and Eusebio. Well, that's some pretty good company. This was Zico's career in a video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe. And yeah, this is it. I'll see you next week. Bye.